All right, let's jump right in to one of the most fascinating figures, I think, in Roman history, Scipio Africanus. I think most of our listeners probably already know a little bit about him, especially his victories, against Hannibal. But what really gets me about his story is how this guy saved Rome, and then he ends up getting betrayed by the same people he was fighting for. I mean, what a story. And that's what we're going to try and unpack today, right? How does somebody go from that level of hero to basically an outcast? And we're doing it all based on this article you sent me, Scipio Africanus, the hero of Rome who was betrayed.
When people talk about Scipio, they a lot of times they focus on like the battles and the tactics, which yeah, that's all important. But what's really interesting to me is the political side of things. I mean, he was a brilliant general, but he also had to play this incredibly dangerous political game, and well, he did it masterfully, at least for a while.
Yeah, it's almost like you're watching, like a grandmaster in chess, just completely outmaneuver everybody, and then suddenly, bam, they make one wrong move and it's all over.
Exactly.
So to understand how this all happened, we need to go right back to the beginning. His father, right, who was a Roman general, was killed in battle against the Carthaginians. It was during the Second Punic War. I was just thinking about that. I can't even imagine losing your dad in such a brutal way. It must have had a huge impact on Scipio, just fueled his ambition and maybe even that sense of duty to Rome.
Oh, absolutely. And it's super important to remember what was going on at the time. I mean, Hannibal was just tearing through Roman legions, crushing defeat after crushing defeat. It created this sense of fear, really, within the Republic. So when Scipio, he's just 26 years old at the time, steps up and says, hey, I'll take command in Spain, it shocked a lot of people.
Okay, wait, 26. I mean, he's practically a kid. Were the Romans that desperate, or is there something more going on?
Well, yeah, there was definitely a sense of urgency. I mean, they needed someone to turn the tide. But it wasn't just a random decision. I mean, sure, Scipio came from a prominent family. Both his father and uncle were, well-respected generals. But he also had this reputation, even at a young age, for courage, for leadership. People were drawn to him. And he had this strategic mind that really impressed people, even experienced veterans. So yeah, they were taking a risk, but it was a calculated risk.
Okay, so it wasn't just nepotism. The guy had some real skills. But Spain was a mess at that time. Hannibal's brother, Mago Barca, he was over there, and the Carthaginians were dug in pretty deep. So what did Scipio do? How did he turn things around?
Well, this is where you start to see his tactical genius, right? He could have just, tried to grind them down, wear them out. But instead, he goes straight for New Carthage, which was their stronghold, really important, strategically, heavily fortified. I mean, it was a bold move.
So what was his plan?
All right, so his plan was to attack by surprise. And not just from land, but from the sea as well. He knew that during low tide, the city was vulnerable on that side.
Wait, hold on. Attack from the sea. I thought Rome was all about its legions, its land armies. Did they even have a navy?
That's the thing. They weren't really known for their naval power. But Scipio, he realized they needed it, so he trained his men in naval warfare. They even adapted this boarding device. It was called the corvus, which basically allowed them to turn a sea battle into a land battle.
Wow, that is so smart. So, what happened at New Carthage? Did his gamble pay off?
Well, it was a total victory. His forces took the city. They captured tons of supplies, thousands of prisoners. But here's the really amazing part. Instead of killing the prisoners or selling them into slavery, which is what normally happened, Scipio offers them their freedom.
No way, really?
Yeah. All they had to do was swear allegiance to Rome.
That is brilliant. I mean, he's not just a great military mind, he's a master psychologist, right? Turning your enemy's strength into a weakness. So what was the impact of that?
Oh, it was huge. I mean, all of a sudden, Scipio has this reputation for fairness, for honor, and it's completely opposite of how the Romans were usually perceived, right? So local tribes start switching sides, joining up with Scipio. And meanwhile, the Carthaginians are losing control, losing support. So yeah, capturing New Carthage was massive, but it was what he did afterward that really made him legendary.
Oh, that's incredible. Now, what about Mago Barca? What happened to Hannibal's brother?
Well, Mago Barca was no slouch. He was a very skilled commander. But Scipio totally outmaneuvered him. The fall of New Carthage basically forced Mago to retreat, and that cut off a major supply line to Hannibal's forces back in Italy. That was a turning point, a huge turning point in the war. From that point on, Rome was in the driver's seat.
So I've got Scipio. He's 26 years old. He's conquering cities. He's winning hearts and minds. He's cutting off Hannibal's supplies. This guy is a rock star. So what's next for a young hero?
Well, this is where things get even more audacious. Scipio realizes To beat Hannibal for good, he needs to take the fight to Carthage itself. He proposes a full-blown invasion of North Africa.
Wow. I mean, talk about a power move. And it must have taken some serious guts to even suggest that. After all, Rome had just spent years trying to get Hannibal out of Italy, and now here's this young general saying, let's go to their turf and finish this.
Exactly. And that's really the question. How did Rome react to this idea? Was this the start of their distrust in Scipio? Were they ready for this?
I guess we're going to have to find out after the break. But before we go, let's just take a minute and appreciate what Scipio had already achieved at this point. I mean, he turned around a war that seemed unwinnable. He became a symbol of Roman resilience. And now he's about to embark on a campaign that will change the course of history. What a story.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So before the break, we were talking about Scipio's super audacious plan to invade Africa. I mean, to take the fight right to Carthage's doorstep. It could have been a brilliant move, or a total disaster. What was the reaction back in Rome? You mentioned, maybe some distrust brewing already.
Yeah, there were definitely some rumblings of discontent. You got to remember, Rome was, well, it was a republic, right? And Scipio, for all his victories, he was still answerable to the Senate. And some senators, especially those from those old, powerful families, they were starting to get nervous. They saw his growing popularity, his independence, as a threat to their authority.
Yeah, it's like that saying, right? The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. But
Yeah.
but hold on a sec. If Scipio had the people and the army on his side, that's a lot of power, right? Couldn't he just ignore the Senate?
Well, not really. I mean, Roman politics, it was complicated. The Senate controlled the money, the resources. So even if Scipio was a hero, he still needed their approval, their funding, to launch this invasion.
So it was like a high-stakes poker game, huh? How did Scipio play it? Did he try to, sweet-talk the senators, or did he play hardball?
He was smart, He used the combination of both. He went to the Senate and said, look, this isn't just about beating Hannibal. It's about securing Rome's future, making sure Carthage can never threaten us again. He argued that if they left Hannibal alone in Africa, he would just rebuild, regroup, and come back stronger. It was a pretty convincing argument. Appealed to Roman pride and their desire for security.
Yeah, I can see how that would be hard to argue with. You don't want to be the guy who voted against Roman dominance. But I'm sure there was some opposition, right? I mean, not everyone was on board with this whole invasion idea.
Oh, absolutely. There was this faction led by Quintus Fabius Maximus, who they actually called Cunctator, which means the delayer.
The delayer. That's an interesting nickname.
Yeah, well, he was known for his cautious approach to warfare.
Right.
He believed that the invasion was too risky, that Rome should focus on consolidating its gains in Italy. He even used Scipio's age against him, said he was too young, too inexperienced for such a massive undertaking.
So you had this clash of generations, different military philosophies, the old guard, like Fabius, urging caution, and the young, ambitious Scipio pushing for a more aggressive strategy. It's a classic conflict, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's a debate that we still see today, right? Should nations be more defensive or proactive? When is it right to strike first? Really big questions.
Yeah, no kidding. So, okay, we've got a divided Senate, a war hero with a bold plan, and the fate of Rome hanging in the balance. What happens next? Does Scipio get his invasion, or do the naysayers win?
Well, Scipio, he was a shrewd politician. He knew how to work the system. So he goes to the people, rallies public support for his cause. He starts building alliances with key senators, promising them, glory, riches if the campaign is successful.
Smart move. It's like he's running for office, campaigning for his invasion plan. So did it work? Did the Senate finally give him the green light?
They did. After a lot of debate, a lot of political maneuvering, Scipio gets his funding, he gets his resources, and he gets his expedition to Africa. It was pretty remarkable, honestly. Shows you how much influence he'd gained.
Okay, things are really heating up now. We've got Scipio landing in Africa, ready to face Hannibal on his own turf. It's like the ultimate showdown, right? Two of the greatest military minds in history going head-to-head. So what happens next?
All right, so Scipio lands in Africa in 204 BC, and right away, he starts reaching out to local tribes. You see, a lot of them were unhappy with Carthaginian rule.
Makes sense.
So Scipio, with his reputation for fairness and, his willingness to offer clemency, well, he starts winning them over.
So it's like he's building his own coalition against Carthage, undercutting Hannibal's support right from under him. Did it work? I mean, did it actually make a difference?
Oh yeah, big time. These alliances, they gave Scipio valuable intel, fresh troops. But more importantly, They forced Hannibal to spread his forces thin, trying to put down these rebellions. It weakened his main army.
Wow. Scipio's playing chess while everyone else is stuck playing checkers. But Hannibal, I mean, he wasn't just going to sit around and watch this happen, right? What did he do?
Well, Hannibal realizes things are getting serious as he pulls out of Italy. After 15 years of campaigning on Roman soil, he heads back to Africa, determined to defend his homeland. He's got a veteran army, and he's ready for a fight.
And this is where we finally get to the big one, right? The Battle of Zama. This is the stuff of legend. So set the scene for us. What were the key moments? What happened?
So the Battle of Zama, it all went down in 2002 BC. And it wasn't just a battle of armies, it was a battle of minds. You know, these two guys, they had been studying each other for years, learning each other's tactics.
I bet.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Both armies, they line up in those traditional formations, infantry in the center, cavalry on the wings. But Hannibal, he had a trick up his sleeve. He put war elephants in front of his lines.
Elephants. Now that's just crazy. I mean, I bet the Romans had never seen anything like that before. How did they deal with them?
Well, Scipio, he was one step ahead. He knew Hannibal would try this. So he tells his men to leave gaps in their lines, right? So when the elephants charge, a lot of them just end up going through these gaps where they get harassed by javelins and all that, you know. They end up causing more chaos for Hannibal's own troops than for the Romans.
So smart. That's what I'm talking about. Anticipating your opponent's moves. That's what makes a great general. Okay, so what about the cavalry? Wasn't Hannibal supposed to have the advantage there, especially with his Numidian allies?
This is where Scipio plays his trump card. Remember all those alliances he was building? Well, one of them was with the Numidian king, Massinissa. And Massinissa brought his cavalry, some of the best in the world, to fight on the Roman side.
He turned Hannibal's own allies against him. That's incredible. So what happened?
It was a massacre. The Roman and Numidian cavalry, they completely outmaneuver the Carthaginian cavalry, chase them off the field, and that leaves Hannibal's infantry totally exposed. The Roman legions, they just swarm them.
So after all those years of fighting, all the bloodshed, it comes down to this. Scipio beats Hannibal at his own game. What happened to Hannibal? Did he escape?
The Carthaginian army was shattered. Hannibal, he barely gets away with his life. And Carthage, well, they're forced to surrender, basically. It's the end of the Second Punic War.
And Scipio, I mean, what a victory. He did what no other Roman could do. He defeated Hannibal. He brought peace to Rome. I bet the celebrations were insane.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, Scipio comes back to Rome, a conquering hero. They give him this honorary title, Africanus, in recognition of his victory. I mean, that name, it became synonymous with his triumph over Hannibal.
Wow, what a story. So here's Scipio. He's at the top of his game, beloved by the people, respected by the army. You'd think he'd be set for life, right? Maybe even aim for, I don't know, consul, the highest office in Rome. But we know that's not what happens. So where does it all go wrong? What sets the stage for his downfall?
That's the tragedy of it all. You see, even as Scipio is basking in his glory, the seeds of resentment, of suspicion, they're already being planted. His popularity, his independence, it rubbed some people the wrong way. And those people, well, they were about to make their move.
All right, so last time we were talking about Scipio and how things start to unravel for him. You know, after all these victories, he ends up facing some serious opposition back home. It's kind of crazy how those in power, they can sometimes turn on their own heroes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you think after saving Rome, you'd be, untouchable. But Roman politics, it was a different beast altogether.
So what was it about Scipio that made the senators so nervous? I mean, they were clearly threatened by him, right? But
Sure.
why?
Well, you got to remember, Rome was a republic, at least in name. And Scipio's power, it came from the people, from the army.
Yeah.
But the Senate, they were supposed to be in charge, calling the shots. And some of those senators, especially those from like the old aristocratic families, they saw Scipio as a loose cannon, someone who might challenge their authority.
So basically, they were afraid he'd become too powerful, too popular, like a threat to the status quo.
Exactly. They couldn't control him.
Yeah.
And that made them very, very uncomfortable.
But those accusations they threw at him, the corruption charges, I mean, was there any truth to those?
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, they accused him of mishandling funds, taking money from the spoils of war. But the evidence was, it was pretty weak. Most historians think it was all just a political hit job, trying to smear his name, damage his reputation.
Yeah, it's like they were trying to cancel him, right? Just like we see today, take down a powerful figure by attacking their character, even if the accusations are, baseless.
It's a tale as old as time.
But the people loved Scipio, right? Surely they didn't buy into all that propaganda.
Well, that's the thing about public opinion, right? It can be very fickle. And Scipio's enemies, they were smart. They started spreading rumors, whispering about his supposed arrogance, his lavish lifestyle. They painted him as this power-hungry general out of touch with the common people.
So they created this whole narrative, this alternate version of Scipio designed to undermine him. And did it work? Did the people believe them?
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely had an impact. Even if people didn't fully believe the rumors, it created this atmosphere of doubt, of suspicion. And that's all it takes sometimes, right, to plant a seed in people's minds.
Yeah, it's tough to fight against that kind of smear campaign, especially when it's coming from, powerful people. Now, I'm not saying Scipio was a saint. He was ambitious, he had a strong personality. Maybe he even played into their hands a little. What do you think?
It's possible. I mean, Scipio, he was used to winning. He was a confident guy, and maybe he underestimated his enemies, thought his reputation would protect him. But in politics, well, sometimes reputation isn't enough.
So how did Scipio react to all of this? Did he fight back, try to clear his name?
He did it first. He went before the Senate and defended himself,
Yeah.
argued that he had served Rome faithfully. But it became clear pretty quickly that the political tide had turned against him. He was losing support. His allies were abandoning him. It was a losing battle.
That must have been crushing for him. After all he'd done, to be betrayed like that by his own people. So what did he do?
In a move that shows both his pride and his disillusionment, Scipio decided to walk away from it all. He left Rome, went into self-imposed exile.
Wow, really?
He spent the rest of his days on his estate in Laternum, far away from the city he had saved. It was a quiet, almost tragic end for a man who had achieved so much.
It's heartbreaking, really. Did he die in exile?
He did. Scipio Africanus died in 183 BC. He wasn't even that old when he passed.
Right.
And according to some accounts, he requested that he not be buried in Rome.
Yeah.
Like a final act of defiance against the city that had turned its back on him.
What a sad end to an incredible life. It's amazing to me how someone who achieved so much, who literally saved Rome, could be brought down like that. But even though he was betrayed, cast aside, I mean, his legacy lives on, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Scipio Africanus, he's still considered one of the greatest figures in Roman history. His military achievements, his strategic brilliance, they had a huge impact on Rome's rise to power. And his story, well, it teaches us a lot about the nature of power, the fickleness of fame, the struggle between ambition and integrity.
And what about for us? I mean, what can we learn from Scipio's life, his triumphs, his tragedies, living in such a different world?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of critical thinking, of questioning authority. Scipio's downfall, it was orchestrated through rumors, through accusations that were largely baseless. And today, I mean, we're constantly bombarded with information, right, from all sides. So we need to be discerning, to look for evidence, to form our own opinions based on facts, not just on what people in power are telling us.
Yeah, that's so important. We can't just blindly follow the narrative, especially when it comes from those who, stand to gain something from it. We need to be more like Scipio, strategic, thoughtful, but maybe with a little more awareness of the political landscape.
Right. And maybe another lesson is the importance of humility. I mean, Scipio achieved amazing things, but maybe that success went to his head a little. Maybe he didn't see the danger coming, the resentment building up around him. It's a reminder that power, no matter how great, it can be fleeting. And real greatness, it's not just about winning battles, it's about navigating those complex human relationships, understanding the dangerous game of politics.
Yeah, Scipio's story, it's a cautionary tale for sure. It shows us that even the most brilliant, the most successful people, they can still fall victim to envy, to betrayal. It's a story that's, well, it's timeless, really. It still resonates with us today.
It does. And I hope that, by exploring Scipio's life, it's made you think about the world around us, about how power works, about how we treat our heroes.
Yeah, it definitely has. What an amazing deep dive this has been.
It really has.
Well, that's it for this episode. But keep thinking about Scipio, about his story, about the lessons we can learn from his life. Until next time, keep diving deep.